They realized your worth. And it didn't happen on the day you were waiting for it to happen. It didn't happen when you were checking your phone every 10 minutes, wondering if they would text, or when you were replaying conversations in your head, trying to figure out what you did wrong. It happened later, quietly, almost in a way you didn't even notice at first. Because the truth is, they didn't just wake up one day and suddenly understand you. That's not how this works. People don't randomly develop clarity about you. They reflect the clarity you have about yourself. And at some point, you change that. You actually changed the way you saw yourself when it comes to them. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Not like, I'm better than them or anything forced like that. It was more subtle. You just stopped seeing yourself as someone who needed something from them. You stopped sitting in that energy of waiting for a text, waiting for validation, waiting for them to finally act right. You kind of got tired of being that version of yourself. And that's where it started. Because before that, if you're honest, you were seeing yourself from a lower place when it came to them. You were putting them slightly above you, maybe not consciously, but it was there in the way you reacted, in the way you overthought, in the way their behavior affected your mood. You were the one adjusting. You were the one trying to understand them. You were the one staying available, even when they weren't consistent. And when you exist like that, people don't question your worth. They assume you'll stay the same. They get comfortable, too comfortable. But then something shifted. And it wasn't because they changed first. You did. You started working on yourself, but not in the typical way people say it. You didn't just distract yourself or pretend not to care. You actually stepped into a different version of yourself. A version of you that doesn't chase. A version of you that doesn't over-explain. A version of you that doesn't feel like they're about to lose something every second. And yeah, it wasn't perfect. There were moments you slipped back. There were days you still checked their last scene or reread old chats. But even then, something was different. You didn't stay there as long. You would catch yourself and you would come back to the version of you who already knows they are enough in this situation. You started living more in that state. And that's the part people don't understand when they talk about manifestation. It's not about saying affirmations 1,000 times. It's about who you are being when you think about them. And you started being someone else. You stayed in the shoes of a person who is different from the one who started this whole journey. That old version of you would have reacted immediately, would have overanalyzed everything, would have made their behavior mean something about your value. But this version pauses. This version doesn't jump to conclusions. This version doesn't feel like everything is slipping away just because there's silence. And when you stay in that version long enough, it becomes natural. It becomes your default. And that's when everything outside begins to shift. Because now, when they look at you, they don't feel the same energy anymore. They don't feel that you were always there in the same way. They don't feel that same predictability. They don't feel that same emotional access they once had. And it confuses them a little because they didn't see you change step by step. From their perspective, it feels like you just became different. Like something about you is not as easy to read anymore. And that's when they start thinking. That's when they start going back to old memories. That's when they start noticing things they ignored before. The way you showed up, the way you cared, the way you were consistent. Things that once felt normal to them now feel rare. And yeah, there is regret in that, but not the dramatic kind you see in movies. It's quieter. It's in the moments where they think about reaching out, but hesitate. It's in the way they replay conversations and realize they could have done better. It's in that subtle feeling of, maybe I didn't see this properly before. And all of this is happening because you changed the story you were living in. You stopped being the person who is trying to be chosen, and you became the person who already is, even if you didn't fully believe it at first. Even if you had to remind yourself again and again, you stayed in that identity more than the old one. And that's enough. Because manifestation isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent with who you are choosing to be. And you chose differently. You chose yourself. You chose your value. You chose to stop making their actions define your state. And once you did that, they had no choice but to start seeing you differently. Because they are not separate from your assumption of yourself. They move according to it. They reflect it. So when you started seeing yourself as someone worth choosing, they started feeling that. When you stopped overgiving, they started noticing your absence. When you stopped reacting the same way, they started questioning their behavior. And now from their side, it feels like they are being pulled toward you. But really, they are being pulled into the version of you that you are now embodying. That's what's happening. It's not random. It's not coincidence. And it's definitely not something they decided on their own without any shift in you. You changed first. Even if it was messy, even if it took time, even if some days you felt like nothing was working, because internally something locked in. You are not that old version anymore. You just aren't. And they can feel that, even if you haven't spoken in days or weeks, even if there's no current interaction. State doesn't need constant contact to be reflected. It just needs consistency. And you gave it that in your own imperfect way. So now when they think about you, it's different. They don't see someone who is waiting. They don't see someone who will always adjust. They see someone who feels stable, grounded, and slightly out of reach. Not in a negative way, but in a way that makes them realize they can't treat you casually anymore. And that realization, that's where your worth becomes visible to them. Not because your worth increased, but because your acceptance of it did. There's a difference. Your worth was always there, always. But now you're not negotiating it. You're not questioning it every time they act differently. You're not abandoning it just to keep them comfortable. And because of that, they are the ones adjusting now. They are the ones thinking. They are the ones feeling the shift. So if you're sitting here wondering whether it's working or not, it is, but not always in the loud, obvious way people expect. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like nothing is happening. But underneath that, everything is reorganizing because you are not feeding the old story anymore. You are not showing up as that version. And that's what changes the entire dynamic. And the interesting part is they can feel they don't have the same version of you anymore. That's what creates that pull. It's not just attraction or curiosity. It's the realization that something they once had access to isn't as available. And that does something to people. It makes them rethink their place in your life. It makes them wonder if they still hold that same position. Because before, they were sure of you. Maybe too sure. They felt like no matter what they did, you would still be there with the same energy. But now, there's a shift. Now there's a version of you that feels more centered in themselves than in them. And that changes everything. Because when you stop making someone your emotional center, they start noticing where they stand in yours. And that's where their attention comes back. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped giving it away so easily. So don't go back. Don't go back to being the version of you who doubts their value the moment something doesn't go perfectly. Don't go back to overanalyzing every small thing, because that version of you is not the one creating this shift. This version is the one who stays a little more calm, the one who doesn't react immediately, the one who knows, even if it's quiet, I am different now. Stay there. Even if it feels unfamiliar sometimes, even if your mind tries to pull you back, because the more you stay here, the more natural it becomes. And the more natural it becomes, the more they reflect it. They realize your worth, but only after you stop questioning it yourself. I hope this helped you. Subscribe, and I'll meet you with another golden nugget soon. Happy manifesting.